website. So I have the distinct honor of welcoming our scholar to the Bima. This Shabbat, we welcome Dr. Sarah Benor as our scholar in residence. Dr. Benor is a professor of contemporary Jewish studies and linguistics director at the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. In addition to speaking tonight on our Bima, Dr. Benor will teach a special Torah study in the morning at 9 a.m. with bagels and coffee for all. She will then speak as part of our 10:30 service offering the Devar Torah, and she will be part of the Jewish Federation of Greater Houston's fabulous Yom Limud on Sunday this weekend. If you've not yet registered, we invite you to do that. It's not too late, and plan to participate in Yom Limud, an amazing community day of learning at Beth Yeshurun this year from 8:30 in the morning till 3:30. There is something for everyone, and I hope that you will take advantage of that. And so I present to you with great happiness and welcome, Dr. Benor. Welcome.
Thank you, Rabbi. I am very happy to be here tonight. Mazel tov to the simchas here in the room. And I'm a professor at Hebrew Union College, which trains the leaders of this congregation, your rabbis, your cantors, your professionals, and it's always an honor to see them in action. So we are in the part of the Torah where the Israelites have recently been freed from enslavement in Egypt. The rabbis around the 1st century ask, why were the Israelites worthy of redemption? Their answer, because they did not engage in gossip or sexual immorality, and they did not change their languages or names. Now, it's understandable that they would talk about gossip and immorality, but languages and names, that seems like an odd thing for the rabbis to say it's worthy of redemption. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about what they meant by did not change their names. They go on and they say, Yehuda did not change his name to Rupa. Reuven did not change his name to Luliani, and Binyamin did not change his name to Alexandri. Now, this sounds odd. These are not Egyptian names. Of course, they didn't change their names to Greek and Roman names. They were referring to the people in their moment, in their Greco-Roman society, who were changing their names, who were using local names of the surrounding society. They were acculturating. And it makes it clear that the rabbis were worried about this acculturation and that they valued Jewish distinctiveness, especially as reflected in biblical Hebrew names. How have these trends played out in history? And what about us, contemporary Jews? Are we worthy of redemption, according to the rabbis? Well, I argue that Jews throughout history have been both a part of and apart from the surrounding society. Tomorrow, I'll be discussing this with regard to language, and tonight I'm going to show how Jews in many times and places have used both distinctive names and local names, and how Jews today are continuing this trend. Now, there isn't actually historical evidence that the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt, but there is evidence from names that there was some contact between the Israelites and the Egyptians. For example, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam are all Egyptian origin names. So even back then, in the 10th century before the Common Era, Jews were using names that were part of the surrounding society. And then in the 1st century BCE, around that time that midrash, that interpretation of the Torah was written, there were names like Yehuda, which is biblical, Mariam, which is Miriam, but the local variant of that biblical name, and Aristobulus, which was a local Greek name. In the 10th century in Cairo, there was a Hebrew name, Ephraim, a biblical local version of a biblical name, Rebecca, and Abdullah, a local Arabic name. In the 13th century in England, Tzipporah, biblical Hebrew, Anna, local variant of biblical Hebrew, Chana, and Peter, local non-Jewish name. In the 16th century in Rome, Esther, Biblical Hebrew, Giuseppe, local variant of biblical name, which is Joseph, and Allegrezza, Italian. And in the 19th century in Poland, the same thing, Chava, Biblical Hebrew, Kalman, which is migrated from Jews in the Hellenic era, Saadia, migrated from Jews in the Middle East to Poland, and Bela, migrated from Jews in France to Poland, Frede, migrated from Jews in Germany, and then local variants of biblical names like Zalman, which is the German version of Salmon, Estera, also a Polish version of the name Esther, and then a local non-Jewish name Fanya. And throughout these periods, you also sometimes found names that were not of Jewish origin, but came to be interpreted as such, coded Jewish names. They were interpreted as Jewish because of homophony, because they sounded the same. So for example, there's a name Schneer, which comes from Signor. It comes from Spanish or Italian or French, and it is interpreted as Hebrew, Shnei Or, two lights, or two light. And you get this in the modern era with names like Maya, which is an international name, but interpreted as the Hebrew for water, or Evan, a Welsh origin name, version of John, interpreted as the Hebrew word Evan, meaning rock, or Lila, Persian for lilac tree, interpreted as the Hebrew for night. Also, throughout history, you get diversity according to gender. A lot more men have had names from the Bible than women. Now, part of this is because women don't have to have a ritual name from Hebrew, whereas men are expected to. But it's also because there are many more characters in the Torah that are men than women who have names. Some of the women are there just without names. There are about 2,700 biblical male names and only about 50 women's names. So what about contemporary American Jews? How are we following these trends or not? Well, I did a survey in 2019. Maybe some of you took the survey, and I asked for people's names and the names of their children. And what we found was that the largest category is names not of Jewish origin. So names like Allegrezza in Rome, right? So in America, it would be names like Mark and Sylvia. 44% of our respondents had those names. But the next biggest category was local variants of biblical names, English versions of biblical characters like Aaron and Ruth. And then all the other categories are much smaller. So modern Hebrew names like Ariella and Lior, 10%. Biblical Hebrew names like Chana and rabbinic names like Akiva, 7%. And then Yiddish names, 1%. And that coded Jewish name category, 4%, like Lila and Emet, which means truth, but is just a non-Jewish name in origin. And you also get diversity according to denomination. So Orthodox Jews are much more likely than non-Orthodox Jews to use distinctive Jewish names. You also see a trend over time. Throughout history, from 1940 to the present, there has been a gradual increase in the percentage of Jews in America who use names that are distinctively Jewish. This especially went up in the late 1960s, where there was a trend toward ethnic pride and multiculturalism. And you also have the phenomenon of having two different names, a name that you use for your everyday life, and then a name that you use for ritual purposes. When you're called to the Torah for a bat mitzvah, for example, you might have your Hebrew name that is different from your normal name. And most American Jews do have a ritual name. Some of them are similar to their normal name. Some of them are completely different. And some of them are, and in Orthodox communities, they tend to be the same name because they're more likely to have Hebrew names as their given name. And also you have geographic diversity. People have honorees for their names, someone that they're named after. And it could be their day-to-day name or their ritual name. Ashkenazi Jews, Jews from Central and Eastern Europe, tend to name after deceased relatives, whereas Sephardi Jews and Mizrahi Jews, Jews from the Middle East and North Africa and originally from Spain, tend to name after grandparents, whether or not they are alive. And this might seem like just diversity, but it's also unity, because Jews around the world are naming after relatives, which leads to the preservation of certain names throughout the centuries. And sometimes when people are named after somebody, or when they're pairing their English name with their ritual name, you get names that are similar in sound, like Asher and Anselm, or Charlotta and Scheindel. Sometimes you get names that are similar in meaning, like Baruch and Benedict, both of which mean blessed. And sometimes they're connected by symbolic associations, like Yehuda and Leo. The tribe of Judah was associated with the lion. But sometimes they're completely different names, like in the Bible, Daniel, who took the name Belteshazzar. So in conclusion, throughout history, Jews have used local names, distinctive names, and names that were coded as Jewish, or two separate names for Jewish and general use. And this reflects tradition and creativity. It reflects being a part of the surrounding society and also apart from it. So to return to that midrash about the Israelites being worthy of redemption because they didn't change their names, it turns out that never was the case. Jews have always changed our names to fit into the local society while retaining some distinctiveness. And I believe that this helped Jews to survive as a minority group in diverse societies around the world. And Jews today are continuing that trend. So we are indeed worthy of redemption. Shabbat Shalom.